and part of our Zoning Atlas leadership team for the pilot project. The idea of a zoning atlas was born in a 2021 paper by Sarah Bronin titled Zoning by 1,000 Cuts. In this paper, she introduced the idea of a national zoning atlas to help better and more easily illustrate the scope and effect of restrictive zoning laws across the country. Of course, she was not the first to identify zoning as an exclusionary practice, but she was the first to conceptualize a tool that planners and other leaders could use to evaluate and analyze zoning patterns in communities and take steps to rectify them through regulatory reforms. Planners have long recognized the exclusionary outcomes of zoning. We know that zoning restricts new housing development. Of course, zoning is not the only barrier to constructing new housing. The high cost of land, the dearth of skilled trades and labor, and the escalating cost of building supplies like lumber and steel all contribute challenges with new housing construction. But as you'll learn over the next hour, the abundance of single-family zoning in every Michigan municipality is a huge barrier to communities and developers seeking to build housing product to meet the housing needs of all current and future community residents. If all we can build is single-family homes, we're preventing young professionals, seniors, teachers, public safety workers from moving to or staying in our communities. We're also not providing appropriate housing for the more than half of Michigan's current residents who comprise single-person or two-person households or families without children. These are the majority of Michigan households in 2024. As you will see during the demonstration shortly, the gap between housing values and wages is exorbitant and prohibitive. So Sarah Bronin took the premise of exclusionary zoning a step further and developed what has become a national movement, the National Zoning Atlas. Michigan Zoning Reform Toolkit, which was completed in 2022 and widely disseminated since that time, included in the Next Steps section of that publication the development of a Michigan Zoning Atlas. We had our charge through that publication, and we had our trifecta of partners with MAP, the University of Michigan, and Housing Next. Kent, Muskegon, and Ottawa counties would be our pilot areas because those areas are some of Michigan's fastest growing in the region, and already professional planners in that region understood zoning reform and had already adopted local reforms to increase housing supply and to make development review quicker. To make the project happen, we had to fund it. Interestingly, each of our three primary partner organizations raised about a third of the necessary funds each, so it was a pretty even distribution. Our investors were the University of Michigan's Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning, Kent County ARPA funds, and MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. MEDC and MAP have had a long-standing partnership and have worked on many projects together. The MEDC recognizes the value that planning and innovative zoning bring to economic success. Michelle Parkinon, MEDC's Managing Director for Technical Assistance and Place Program Services at MEDC, was familiar with the National Zoning Atlas concept and understood exactly why such a tool was needed in Michigan. A planner herself, she advocated for the initial MEDC funding that MAP brought to the initiative, along with the Taubman and ARPA funds. We could not have completed the Zoning Atlas pilot for the Tri-County area in Grand Rapids without the generosity of our funders and their understanding of the value that a zoning atlas would bring to housing development in Michigan. I'm now going to turn it over to Rob Goodspeed, who will provide an introduction to the Zoning Atlas.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Great to see the interest in our project today. Before I launch into this slide, I'll explain the structure of the presentation. I'm going to speak briefly about the methodology the Atlas used. We'll then provide a live demo, and Leah Dumichel from MAP will demonstrate an example of a couple of questions that our data can answer. Ryan Kilpatrick will then share an example of a specific applied analysis using our data in the Grand Rapids region that shows the insights that you can develop from this type of information. And then we'll conclude with a few remarks about our plans for the project and possibly how you can be involved. A zoning atlas like ours has two components, and we generally follow the methodology established by Sarah Bronin, which has been used in many other states, including New Hampshire, Wyoming, Virginia, and so forth. And on the one hand, what you need are boundaries of zoning districts. We collected those by working with our regional partners, and in the Grand Rapids area, for the 3 counties that are included in the pilot, we found most of the boundaries were available through Regis, a regional GIS consortium in the Grand Rapids area, as well as the county GIS offices. However, we had a graduate student here at Michigan look through these boundaries and in some cases make corrections where the spatial data we obtained were a little bit um, outdated. And we think in many parts of the state there already are digital boundaries of zoning, and therefore it's just a matter of collecting and ensuring that they're updated. The real effort or work in the atlas comes in creating the variables. And so for every district shown on the map, the atlas suggests that you create about 107 variables and you code what housing types are allowed, things like parking requirements and setbacks, height restrictions, and so forth. And we did this actually just using Google spreadsheets, but the National Atlas has created a digital infrastructure, which we are hopeful further regions in Michigan will make use of, where you'll get an account for a system. And once it's set up, you can go in and through a system of checkboxes and drop down menus, enter in the information for each district in the community where you're coding. And so we think the best way to kind of convey what it is this data contains is through showing what questions it can answer. So I'll ask Leah to go ahead and switch over to the live demo. So if you load, so our project has a website, mizoningatlas.org, but the map that's shown on that page is actually the same as what's shown on the zoningatlas.org national site. And so if you start out the whole country, you'll see the only parts of Michigan that have data are Kent, Ottawa, and Muskegon counties, and hopefully will be growing soon. And so what this starts with is it just shows basically the purple are the zoned lands in these counties. And so first I'll ask Leah to toggle where people can build single family homes. So this is using an attribute when we read through the codes where single family homes are allowed. And as you might expect, it's pretty universal. There's perhaps a few districts which are exclusively agricultural or non-residential, but single-family homes are broadly legal here in our jurisdictions. Then you can also look at which zones allow apartments with 4 or more units. And this is a much different pattern. And you can see, in essence, only a fairly small number of districts in Grand Rapids and a handful of other communities allow this form of housing. And you can see we've also collected information about accessory dwelling units, which is a interesting typology, a very practical way to increase housing types. And then I'll ask Leah to just open the advanced filters briefly, not necessarily to click on anything, so we can see what it contains. And so you can go for each typology, you can go into whether it's allowed by right, looking at parking requirements, height limits, and so forth. So it does allow some interactive exploration of the data. Great, thanks so much. And so one thing we did for the pilot is take this data and do some simple descriptive analysis in GIS. And so we found, looking at residential land only, that 92% of it allowed single-family homes, only 2.2% allowed apartment buildings with 4 or more units. Somewhere in between, about 4.9% allowed duplexes, and only 5.9% allow ADUs. And mostly they require at least 2 parking spaces per unit. And the methodology, as well as these and other descriptive statistics, are available in a report that we've prepared about this pilot, which we posted to our project website just yesterday, and we'll highlight in the follow-up message as well. And that report as well gives you a little bit more detail, as well as the references to the national methodology for those of you who really want to dig in to understand what the variables are. And I should say the national data are available, and so therefore, if you have creative ideas for requiring technical access to this information, please reach out to us and we can share it with you. However, the interface, as you see, makes it widely available to the public for many different interactive queries. And so kind of in that vein, next, Leah's going to show a little bit more detail, some specific questions that you could answer already in this region, or if we created data in your region as well.
Great. Thank you, Rob. We're going to scoot forward to a couple of questions that we could answer right now. So I want to approach using the Atlas from two perspectives, how it can fit into the development process as it exists today, and then also how communities can use it to think about the zoning changes that they want to make. So let's start with the development process. So I was a planning consultant before I was at MAP, and in that time, I found that the initial site selection and the what's allowed where conversations was just really one of the most challenging things. And that was from both sides of the counter, right? It was frustrating to the person who was across from me because it seemed like they just could not get even a simple answer from the zoning code without some personal guidance. And it was frustrating to me because I never seemed to have as much capacity to give that guidance as I wanted to, whether the community was big or small. So I think this tool can be a game changer for people specifically who are not planners, but who still need to use a zoning ordinance, like a lot of you here, right? Local officials, county and regional staff, housing advocates, realtors, financial institutions, and developers, most especially the new and small scale developers that we really need to get into the game in order to get to a workable range of housing in all our communities. We can't do it with the capacity that we have right now. I do have a couple of caveats. One I want to say right now is that this is just not going to replace every visit to your planning counter. And it's most certainly not going to replace that last one where you find out exactly what you need to do and exactly how to do it for the site that you've picked out. But we do think that it can take a lot of pressure off the first few visits, the ones where you're just trying to understand the scope of what's possible and where. So I'm going to step into the shoes of a developer, maybe a brand new one, thinking about getting into the game, and we will have a look around. So let's just say, because it's true, that I'm a big fan of duplexes. I live in one. I think they're flexible. I think they're attainable to build. I think they fit nicely into any context. And so I want to build some of this great housing type in Ottawa County. So I'm going to go over here and I am going to zoom to Ottawa County and scooch in there. And then I'm going to go down to those advanced filters that Rob showed us. And I am going to inquire about where two-family housing is allowed. And I can see first where it's allowed by right. And now I'm going to think, well, maybe I would like to know where it's also available by public hearing. Okay, those are a few more options. I'm a first-time developer, so I'm a little intimidated by the public hearing process. So, and this is just my initial recon, so I'm going to stick to where it's allowed by right. I heard what Rob said about minimum parking requirements. I'm kind of interested in where I can build my duplex that does not have a minimum parking requirement. So I will toggle that feature on, and then I will see where you can build a duplex with no parking requirement. Oh, I see that most of my options have disappeared. So I know from the beginning of my project, okay, I'm going to have to build a parking requirement in. That saves me some time just knowing that just in my project design, just from the very beginning. So I'm going to take a look around here. It looks to me like maybe this Holland area is promising. It's got some purple areas. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and take a look around. The first thing that I notice, putting my planner eyes back on, is that I can see these opportunities in several different jurisdictions at once. So I can see where the districts in the city of Holland that allow my two-family housing. I can see districts in Holland Charter Township that allow it. I can see districts over in the city of Zeeland that allow it. And so again, if I were at the very beginning of a project, often this information is only available by personally visiting or at least rummaging through a zoning code of each one of these individual districts. So just now, let's say I was going to have to visit each of these communities. I've just saved myself, I've put maybe a day and a half's worth of work into the last, 30 seconds or so. So this is the kind of sort of exploration that we think is really exciting about this. So let's say I'm looking around and I think that the city of Holland has some good opportunities here. They have a variety of different districts that I could put my two-family housing in. So a traditional neighborhood residential, sure, but also this education district if I'm interested in sort of student-focused housing. I can see a greenfield mixed use. I can see a corridor mixed use. So there's a whole suite of different contexts that I can consider to start with. So I've been talking to Ryan, whom you'll hear from in a minute. So I'm pretty interested in this corridor mixed use. And you can see that the outline becomes darker when I highlight over the same sort of district. And so I can see that there's an area up here. There's also an area down here. I don't know what those contexts look like because I'm not too familiar with Holland, but I'm going to see what else I can see here. So I'll go back over to my layer options and I'm going to turn on some imagery. And I'm going to make my zoning just a little bit lighter so I still know where I'm going, but I can see underneath it. And I'm going to kind of zoom in to this section right here. So, my planner eyes, right? I can see these are some pretty big buildings. I can see there's some big parking lots. I can see that the buildings are a bit far back from the road. They're a little spread out. I think there's some good opportunity here, but this isn't quite the context that I had in mind for my little two-family development. I remember that there was another opportunity for corridor mixed use over here. And so I just kind of scroll over and zoom in again over here to take a look more closely. And I can see, and again, I don't know what's here, but I'm just kind of taking an initial look. This looks like it might be some, dense two-family, some dense multifamily housing. I can see that these buildings, they're a little bit smaller. They're a little bit closer to the road. This is kind of more the context that I had in mind. So again, I haven't made any investment decisions here, but this is enough information for me to put this on my list and to say, okay, I'm now going to go drive this corridor, or I'm going to look at what opportunities are available. It has really gotten me from an idea to a little further down the road much faster than I would have been able to get to otherwise. So I'll take this back, I'll put my opacity back up, I will reset all my filters, and now I have another question. Let's just say, again, because it's true, that I really like the city of Muskegon, and I am impressed with their revitalization efforts. I think that they are doing good things there. I would like to be a part of what they're doing there. And so I am interested. This time, I don't really have a housing project in mind. I just know that I would like to do it in the city of Muskegon. I would like to see what kind of housing they permit and what my opportunities there are. So I'll take my county filter off there now, and I will look for a specific city here, and we will zoom right into the city of Muskegon. This time, I'm actually not going to start with the map. I'm going to scroll down to what they call these cards of zoning districts in the selected areas. And what this does is it just shows me what the opportunities or what kinds of housing are permitted in each of the districts. So I can see that in the business districts, there's no housing allowed really at all, and that's fine. I can scroll down a bit and I can see that there are some form-based districts that allow a wide range of housing, all of which requires a public hearing to approve, and that's interesting and fine too. And now I'm going to just kind of take a look down and see, okay, but in like the traditional housing districts, what kind of housing is allowed and what are the opportunities there? I can see that there are several single-family districts where, as one would expect, one-family housing is what's allowed. I can see that there are some traditional low density and medium density and high density districts where there is a greater flexibility, a greater range of housing types that are allowed. And the high density really is just the 3 and 4 families that are allowed here. And I can see there is a two-family residential district just in case I do still carry my dream of a duplex along with me. One other thing I'd like to point out about this portion is that it not only tells you what's allowed, but it also tells you how many acres are in that zoning district. So for instance, this high density multifamily residential, there's only 6 acres of it. So while I might think that that's an interesting housing type, and I do think that, maybe I would like to try that out, I can see that the opportunities are much smaller than they are in other places. And if I'm really kind of looking around, I might want to see where there is more land available for that. Same with two family, pretty small at 29 acres. So as I'm taking a look at this, I can see that by far, I don't need any math to tell me that the single family districts have the greatest amount of area allocated to them. I'm going to set my sights here on this low density multiple family residential, which has 353 acres, and it allows the whole spectrum of housing that we have here. So there, I'm going to click on this show more details, and we are going to take a look at this zoning magic that is contained here, really. So it contains a lot of the dimensional standards that will apply to the district, as well as some other regulations that are often found sort of scattered around the zoning ordinance. This is the part of the atlas that contains all of those 107 variables that Rob mentioned, that we coders, I was on the team that did it, scoured the zoning ordinance to find so that we could locate them once and then use that work many times. So I see what the minimum lot size is. I can see whether there are parking requirements, whether there are things like infrastructure connectivity requirements. It doesn't tell me every single dimensional standard or what those requirements are, but it does indicate whether or not they exist. So this really narrows down what you have to go chasing through the zoning ordinance for, and it helps you point to where to find it. I want to show you one more thing, putting my planner hat back on, and talk about a way that this information can be useful to the communities that it covers. So we'll clear my filters again here, deselect my jurisdiction, go back to the beginning here, and let's just say, again, because it's true, that the city of Wyoming is looking into developing an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. So they've had some recent work with their master plan that's let the Planning Commission know that this is a community priority, and they're ready to turn that engagement into some policy and regulation. Well, both at MAP and when I was a planner in private practice, I know that one common place that a lot of communities start with is the question, okay, well, what are our neighbors doing? And this is helpful to know, both because we can learn from each other and because housing is really a regional concern, right? Often a community would like, and also a community would like to know how things are actually going on the ground once something is allowed. So let's look and see what we can learn. So now I'm going to zoom to the city of Wyoming. And there it is now. I'm going to go to my advanced filter and see who allows accessory dwelling units. The city of Wyoming does not, and that's fine. We just discussed that. I'll point us to this little filtering results that tells us what percentage of the zoned acres and what percentage of the zoning districts there are. But now if I zoom out, I can get a look at what the neighbors are doing, right? So now from this view, I can see all of the jurisdictions around that allow accessory dwelling units by right. I can mouse over them. I can see what kind of districts they are, low density residential over here. I can see agriculture over here in Gaines. I can see also agriculture in Alpine and rural residential in Cannon. This is Spring Lake Township, both agricultural, rural residential. Okay, there's some opportunities there. How many allow it by public hearing? I can click on that and I can see, okay, there's some more opportunities there. I noticed that I can find out about occupancy restrictions just right here. So first, the places that have occupancy restrictions, there was not much change there. So that looks like a lot of them do. Maybe I switch it to no and say, okay, there's where there are no occupancy restrictions. Maybe I'm interested in the places where it is just the most relaxed. So I take off the maybe. Where are the places that accessory dwelling units are allowed by right and without occupancy restrictions? So I note where those places are. I can see that really it is almost the entirety of Spring Lake Township here. So maybe I zoom to that. So that my little filtering window comes up here and I can see that indeed they allow them without restriction and by right in 83% of the zoned acres and in 6 of the 13 zoning districts. Well, if I'm the planner there, I might open that zoning ordinance up. I might see how is that written. I might give the planner a call. I might see how long it's been like that. I might see what the results have been. I might see if they have had, if they've addressed any of the concerns that my public or my planning commission have brought up. I happen to know from talking to the planner in the city of Wyoming that actually they are considering doing these differently in different parts of the community. So just for my sort of clicking on and off, I can identify a place which is Gaines down here, where they have a variety of different ways of permitting them. So here there are occupancy restrictions, and they are allowed only by right down here in the agricultural district. And I can see that without occupancy restrictions, it is allowed by right up here in a single family residential zone. And without occupancy restrictions, but with a planning public hearing here in a different residential zone. So again, I might open that zoning ordinance up and I might see how those ordinances are written. I might give the planner a call. I might find out how that has been working for them. And again, this is, so from the planner's point of view, this saves an awful lot of time too. I mean, this is a lot of zoning ordinances to comb through. This is a lot of planners to call if you don't have any place to start. So there are a couple of examples for us. I do want to offer my second caveat, which is that we are asked all the time about, well, first of all, it bears repeating that this is a high-level tool. It makes no guarantees good enough to base an investment decision on. We were well-trained and we were diligent while we were doing this, but of course, number one, mistakes do happen. But more importantly, for our purposes, change happens, and we really hope that it will. So a question that we get all the time is how updates will occur. And the short answer is that that is an excellent question and everyone is working on it. So both nationally and at the state level, we're sort of at the beginning in the building phase of this project. But the national team is exploring ways to take that on because they think that they will ultimately be the ones that are responsible for it. We think, especially at this phase, while we're working on zoning reforms, that will be important for the local teams to take that on. For right now, while we're building this, what I would say is call us up at MAP, call me up. We will facilitate any updates that you'd have because we would like to know about the zoning reforms that are happening. So now that we have talked about all the ways that we could use this atlas, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Kilpatrick to show us some ways that we are using this data already.
All right, thanks, Leah. So to Leah's point, we took it a step further, right? So she has now shown you how the zoning atlas in its current state can be used. We took all of the data from the zoning atlas and then imported it into our own GIS model so that we could begin to evaluate how do we affect change countywide in Kent County. And specifically what we were interested in is understanding what are we going to get in a status quo development scenario. If we don't make any changes to our local zoning, housing could we build? And where could we build it? And what kind of housing are we allowed to build? So using the zoning atlas and then overlaying the county assessor's data to understand where all the vacant land was, what we wanted to understand is how much of that vacant land is zoned to allow housing, and then how much of that residentially zoned vacant land allows something in addition to single family homes. So what you can see here on the screen is we've got almost 130,000 acres of vacant land in Kent County, which is a lot, right? So technically we could build all the way through 2050 and a little bit beyond. If we were to meet all of our growth projections in Kent County, we're anticipating a continued growth trajectory of about 1% per year growth. And so we would need about another 75,000 housing units between now and 2050. And we could do that under current zoning. The problem is we end up building on the vast majority of vacant land countywide, most of which is either agricultural, forest, or protected farmland. So we didn't feel like that was a great solution, especially because most of that land is not currently served with sewer and water infrastructure. And so either we've got to install a whole lot of septic tanks and then start worrying about groundwater contamination over the long term, or we've got to extend a ton of sewer and water infrastructure. So you can see there that second bullet on the PowerPoint in front of you, 97.8% of the vacant residentially zoned land is zoned for single family homes. So what Leah shared with you earlier is a smaller percentage of land is exclusively single family, but most of the land that allows for 2-family or 4-family or more is already occupied, right? It already has a building on it or multiple buildings. And so we would have to buy that, tear down whatever's on the land and replace it in order to get multifamily. There's very little land available for 2-family and multifamily. Go ahead, next slide. So the next thing we wanted to do is understand what do we actually need across Kent County to serve all of the different price points that we know are necessary to support our households. And so what you can see here is about 25% of Kent County households can afford the traditional new single family home on an acre and a half. They need to earn an average income of about $112,000 a year or more. Another roughly 25% of households could afford new construction if it were an attached townhome or a duplex kind of a structure. Another 10% could afford new construction if it's constructed as multifamily. And then 42% of the county can't afford the cost of new construction, period, unless it's got some kind of a subsidy. So what we can see here is roughly 34, 35% of households in Kent County could afford new construction, but only if it's adequately zoned to allow for something other than large lot single family. Go ahead to the next slide, Leah. And this is how we're actually zoning, right? So this is what illustrates that 97.8% of land is exclusively set aside for single family homes, with an average lot size of 1.5 acres and an average lot frontage of 78 feet. Only 1.6% of land is available for townhomes or duplexes, and 0.6% of vacant land is available for new multifamily. And so we know that we're never going to meet our housing goals countywide if we continue with the status quo. And we sort of knew that without the zoning atlas, but we couldn't prove it. We didn't have any data. We couldn't illustrate it in this way. We could talk about it and say we think that's true. But as a result of the zoning atlas, we were able to definitively describe where can we build new housing, what kind of housing are we allowed to build, and then using our market data, we can articulate what will it cost to build those new homes that were currently permitted, and how do we compare that to household incomes. And then go ahead to the next slide. So then the last thing that we did in order to support an alternative growth trajectory is begin to articulate where do we have opportunities for redevelopment? Where do we have underutilized land that already has access to sewer and water? It already has access to high traffic corridors. So we're not putting new traffic in existing single family neighborhoods or out in rural places where the road just can't handle it. We looked at 32 corridors across Kent County and began to model new neighborhoods. We modeled new infrastructure that would be needed, if any, and we modeled the new taxable value that would result. Go ahead to the next slide. And so then what we're able to do with that data is clearly illustrate what does a status quo scenario look like if we were to build out Kent County to achieve those 79,000 housing units under a status quo scenario. We need to invest in roughly $25 billion worth of new infrastructure in order to serve the whole county. Or we could focus on those 32 corridors with an estimated 32% build out rate, achieve the same number of housing units almost with a fraction of the infrastructure investment. And meanwhile, what ultimately happens here is we're able to bring the average price point for the new home that gets built down by $100,000 per unit. Now, it's still not deep low income affordable. We're still averaging about $325,000 per unit in the corridor strategy, but that's well below the $425,000 to $450,000 average price point in our single family. So what we're now doing with this information on the back of the zoning atlas is taking this data to each of our municipal partners and saying, we need a regional growth strategy. It doesn't need to be top down, right? We're not deciding at the county level or at the regional level what happens on the ground in local municipalities, but we're giving our local municipalities a roadmap to say, here's how you can contribute to solving for our housing challenges at the price points that we most need them, starter homes, middle income rental product, as well as low and affordable housing. But also, how do we grow our overall tax base while not overextending our infrastructure, while not expanding growth into sensitive natural areas or agricultural areas? How do we conserve the places that are most important to the identity of West Michigan while simultaneously building strong place-based neighborhoods with a lot of walkability, which is what roughly half of the housing market is looking for? So in summary, we never could have done any of this data analysis without the zoning atlas. And we were able to build on the data from the atlas in order to model a true sustainable growth strategy that we're now getting a lot of traction across Kent County with several local municipal partners. And then I'll hand it back over to the team.
Thank you. I just never get tired of that. Like it is fascinating to me every single time. So you can read in more detail about that corridor work in the final project report, which also takes you through the project development and the findings. So that's at our website, mizoningatlas.org. And then for those of you who are MAP members, the next issue of your magazine will cover it as well. So with the completion of the pilot project, right, the big question is, okay, what's next? So the first answer is that Northwest Michigan is next. They are super fortunate to have Housing North, which is a housing-focused organization similar to Housing Next. And their fearless leader, Yarrow Brown, has been working toward getting a zoning atlas developed in that region. It'll begin with Grand Traverse County, which is funded and ready to go. And then there are a couple more in the planning stages. We are also at MAP and on the team in receipt of requests from a few other counties who have heard about the work along the way and feel like it's right for them. So we've queued them up to explore participating in that now that the pilot project is complete. And there we go. So we at MAP have been working to translate what we've learned in the pilot into a general scope and a budget that we can use to guide future projects. So the first consideration is that we have found that the right scale for this project is at the county or the region. So those are the folks that we're looking to partner with. It does not necessarily need to be the county or the region per se, but organizations who are at that geographic scale. The second consideration is that the National Zoning Atlas system that we're becoming a part of the National Atlas, is organized into state teams. So every project will have a funded partnership with MAP for organization and management and with the University of Michigan for training and education, so that we execute these all as consistently and beautifully as they have been done to date. And then after that, the county or the region will need to consider how this project design will work for them, how involved they want to be, and what they need out of it. So there's a couple of models. The Northwest Michigan Partnership is a good example of a community-led approach. They're planning to get trained on the GIS and on the code analysis inside their region, and then to do that work themselves. There, it's part of a larger regional housing conversation, and this provides an opportunity for them to work together and to learn together, and then to carry that work forward, for example, as Ryan has done in West Michigan. But the pilot project, on the other hand, just the Zoning Atlas part of it, was an example of approach that was really led by the Michigan Zoning Atlas team. So we secured the data, we did the analysis, and now it's available for use throughout the region. So for everyone who has heard this today, and if you thought this would be valuable in your county or region, we would really like to hear from you about exactly how it could work for you. I mean, it will take some capacity and some funding in every region, no matter what the project design is, right? So a decent ballpark for cost, with every caveat that you can think of about that, depending on a good handful of factors, including how many jurisdictions you have, what the hourly rates are, what the capacity is, who does the work. But a ballpark starting figure is around $25,000, and that includes your time as well as ours. We have here a few ideas about places that you could look for that funding. We do think that capacity might just be just as hard, if not harder, to come by than the funding, and that's really a critical piece. So at a minimum, there will need to be a dedicated advocate and facilitator inside the region or the county. And then after that, we'll want to look carefully at your needs and be realistic about what time and skill is available. MAP is ready to build a team on our end, and that has to be guided pretty firmly by the projects that, are interested and that are actually going to happen. So we want to hear from you. If you like what you hear today, you can take it back to your own team, see what you can pull together. There's good information about these possible approaches that's on our website, again, mizoningatlas.org. You can use the contact us link that's on there. That goes right into my inbox. You can also reach out to me directly if you already have my email address or you're not intimidated by spelling my last name, or you can go through MAP's general information email. All of those will get right to the team. And so right now, I am going to stop my share here, and then we would like to take some questions.
Hello, we do have some questions. This is kind of a combination of one, and I know that you talked about updates. So the first question was, Grand Rapids recently updated its zoning ordinance. At what point was their data? Is it old GR data or is it the new zoning? At what point was when you were doing the atlas? Did you get the new stuff?
Nope. The new stuff is not incorporated yet, but we should be able to have it in the next 60 days.
Got it. Okay. And it was kind of a two-parter, and I know you spoke to this, but if you can speak to it a little bit more. So is there a plan to, because zoning does change, continually integrate it and keep it a live document?
Yeah, we're going to want to work with, oh, go ahead, Rob. I see you.
Why don't you speak from the perspective of your region, and then I'll give the statewide elaboration.
Okay. So Rob's team has been great about training folks on the ground when it comes to understanding how do we make these updates, who should be responsible for them. For right now, we think Housing Next is going to be the entity that's going to learn how to do those updates on a regular basis. But more and more, we're going to want to hand over some of that ability to our MPOs. So we've got a metropolitan planning organization here, Grand Valley Metro Council, that is really uniquely positioned. They do a ton of GIS mapping already. They hold a copy of everybody's zoning ordinance as it is. So we think they're going to be the best entity to hold it over the long term.
Got it. Thank you. And we had comments that, yes, the Grand Rapids made very significant changes in their zoning ordinance.
And Amy, can I just jump in just to explain how
Sure.
this has been handled? We learned that the way it's been handled in a few other states is an annual or biennial update, because truly to do it comprehensively, you need to revisit every zoning code. For our region had 85 jurisdictions, so it'd be every zone jurisdiction, and then handle significant reforms as one-offs so that the tool is updated. But I guess I would step back and have the perspective that although on the one hand zoning is constantly amended and evolving, on the other hand the general patterns in my experience in Michigan have remained largely static. And tell me a community which has increased the land area where apartments are allowed dramatically. That's pretty rare. So those rare, exciting things, we have the capacity to do it. But your little nitpicky updates, it's technically extremely easy to give a local jurisdiction or some other entity the ability to update the data. But this is not intended to be used for, it's a scoping planning tool, as Leah described, get a general sense of what's allowed. It's not intended to be, we changed our parking from 1.5 to 2, like who cares? Go read the code. So not to be glib. So it's not an operational administrative day-to-day tool. It's a yearly snapshot. How are we doing as a region or as a community? What housing types are we allowing? Do we allow these innovative types at all? And if we're allowing it, do our neighbors allow it? So those are the questions it's really good for. And and we have a whole section in the report. Read it and come call us up.
Is there any plan in sort of the 3.0 version, perhaps, to do parcel data overlaid on top of it?
Yeah, I did want to speak to that question as well. I think I and the team, we really think of this project as about creating a new data set. And it's convenient that there's a national atlas that has a geospatial tool that does have a little bit of contextual data. You notice there's a base map, they have some information about preserved lands to kind of put it in context, but it's not a planning support system. It's not a replacement for your GIS office's web portal that has dozens of local layers. And those, I've been involved in projects to create those tools to allow overlaying multiple factors to more complex analyses. And so I think you should view us as providing a very valuable input into other types of tools that for the overlaying. We can't be the one planning support tool for the whole state. With enough money, I'd be happy to create it, but Elon Musk is busy, and so like, and also just more realistically, every region and city, like there's tons of these locally tailored tools where local officials have painstakingly created them that are full of data. So I think the answer would be work with us to create the zoning data, and then we'll give you the shapefile, and you can put it in your local GIS and overlay to your heart's delight. And I think that's the best approach. Yeah.
And that's probably, we did have a question about working with DNR and Agriculture Department to overlay where high value natural agricultural zones are. So I think maybe you answered that question. So thank you for that. All right, next one. Have you, it jumped on me, sorry. Have you found that small developers are becoming aware of the Atlas, or is this still just brand new?
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
I would say we're still building our network of small developers. They're few and far between, or at least we don't know about very many of them. So one of the valuable assets that comes from the zoning atlas is we're really simplifying access to information for folks that aren't used to combing through a complicated zoning ordinance. I saw some comments. People seem to be familiar with the Grand Rapids zoning ordinance changes. They made some really significant changes that are super valuable, and their code is really hard to read, right? If you haven't been steeped in that code for a long time, it is difficult to figure out what's allowed and what the special provisions look like. You got to be all over the place in that code. The zoning atlas really simplifies a lot of that. It doesn't tell you everything that you need to know, but it makes it much more clear where you're allowed to build. And not just in the city of Grand Rapids, but across the 3-county region. So back to the original question, we're building out our network of small developers, and this is a great asset that you can share with them.
Thank you. So other than these 3 counties, what is the queue looking like? Can you tell us what communities have already signed up for the next round?
So Northwest Michigan is the one that is sort of the furthest along and the furthest, kind of on deck. And I will say that, Housing North has seen the value of this immediately, and not only them, but also the city of Traverse City, which does have just the kind of detailed GIS resources that, Rob and Ryan were describing. And so that is the place that is definitely in the next. The places that we are, sort of also have in our sites. And so if you have expressed interest that I'm probably not, at liberty to call out in a public webinar, because we're just still talking things through, right? But places that are growing quickly, I think have definitely the highest need for this, because, right, as the demand affects the affordability, right, that sort of combines with the lack of supply and is the most pressing and urgent need. So I think that's the easiest thing to say. Our fast growing regions, regions that really know that they need reform, and that understand that this is a regional issue in their area, because housing is really under local control, and yet it's affected by regional forces. And so this is really meant to help sort of bridge the gap between that little conundrum there.
All right, we did have a question. I think that Dr. Goodspeed answered it, but it was asking about it looks like it appears to have disappeared. It was asking about the GIS, and it looks like you've answered that, Dr. Goodspeed. Is that correct?
Yeah, so
it disappeared from me. So okay,
it's in the answer column. Yeah, so hi Jason.
Okay.
This is the
no, it's fine. That's
somebody from Regis who actually was hugely helpful. We built use their spatial data for the project. So yeah.
All right, how are you growing the network with small developers?
I'm guessing that's a follow-up for me.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So we are launching an equitable development initiative. Hopefully that press release goes out in the next 24 hours. It's a partnership with the Urban League of West Michigan. And so that'll be a 20 cohort small developer initiative where we work through a set of curriculum similar to the CETM boot camp, but instead of having a big chunk of the time dedicated to LIHTC, we're really going to be focused on two families, small lot, single family, fourplexes, townhomes, those kinds of things. Something that you could get financed by refinancing your own single family home and taking some money out or borrowing a little bit from friends and family. So we're starting there. But we're also using the Zoning Atlas. We're starting up quarterly meetings here in West Michigan. The network is small so far, but we've got about a half a dozen folks who are partnered, and hopefully over time that takes on a life of its own. Housing Next likes to launch things and then let them fly away and be their own creature. So our hope is that we can launch it and then it becomes its own entity that somebody else wants to manage and make even greater.
Yeah, I heard you mention CETM there. So, and then that's the region. So Ryan's speaking about the region, and I would just put in a little follow-up that, an organization that is sort of leaning into the work of training small developers and helping to give them the resources that they need is that one, the Community and Economic Development Association of Michigan.
Thank you. So this was very informative. Somebody said, any suggestions on what are your takeaways on zoning ordinance simplification as you learned coding it that you found were just difficult?
I think this is a Leah question, but maybe this is a motivation. This is a pretty wonky audience. If you really want to educate yourself about contemporary zoning, then no better way to do it than sit down and read them. So yeah, Leah, what's your thought? I mean, that again, it's a little oblique to our project, but I think one reason we're excited about the more collaborative approach is organizations like Housing North already have a lot of local expertise, but in order to do this, they're going to have to sit down and read every zoning code, and so they're going to have really deep expertise of both the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how everyone's doing it, and the nuances about maybe where reforms are needed. So yeah, Leah, what's your take on this issue?
Yeah, so I was on the team that did the coding, just one of the analysts like everybody else. And really one thing that sticks out a bunch when you're doing this is just how much chasing through the zoning code that you end up needing to do. Like, oh, this little piece of information is here. I felt very fortunate to have had 10 years of professional private practice experience to have done that. So I've been back and forth in a zoning code. And if you didn't have that, then there's a bit of a learning curve. So just like the top level takeaway is that, putting as much information about one district in the same place as possible. And I know from my old experience of writing these, so then the risk that you introduce there, if you're the one that's putting together a zoning code, is that it ends up being not consistent. So it's easy to make a change in one district. You want it to apply to all of them. And if you've broken it up by district, then, you kind of have to, the writer of the code, have to kind of go chasing through it to make sure that it remains consistent. But I think for usability, if your goal is to have a code that's usable, that is maybe the top level place to start, is to sort of view it as the user and to not just put the things where they sort of logically make sense, but also when you're formatting to, have very clear arrows toward where you need to look next. There's often just a line that says, look in these other 6 chapters, and that is not quite sufficient to get most people to where they need to go. So there's a couple of ideas.
All right, thank you. So we do have let's see, I'm going to skip to the last one and then we'll work backwards from there. Have any of the Michigan tribes contacted you at all about this?
No, they have not. I think that would be delightful. I would love to learn from them and to work with them.
Here's a good one. So in those yearly updates that you've talked about, that's going to be built in, is that's like done then? That's not something that there's another fee as this is a living document. You're not penalized for updating your zoning ordinance, basically.
No,
No,
I mean, I think at the local level, we want to have an agency that are just, this is part of what they do, right? And hopefully our partners, who are also funders in a lot of instances, see enough value in that they're willing to make, a little bit of a contribution to ensure that the staff hours are there to update those codes into the Atlas. But it's definitely not something that we're going to go back to a township and say, well, now you owe us money.
Thank you. And here's a GIS question, or just really how you guys handled it with your coding. So you've got overlay zones, you got floating zones. I did see you had planned residential development, so a PUD that's residential on that toggle. But how did you guys decide to handle those floating or overlay zones?
We didn't make that decision. So everything that we do is thought out by the national methodology. So the overlays themselves, at like the first question, basically for every district, you answer those 107 questions. And the first question is this a regular zoning district or is it an overlay? And then you answer all of the remaining questions, sort of based on that. So that is how the overlays were handled. And then there's a whole separate column for PRDs. And over the course of the year or so that we were working on entering this data, there were also monthly meetings of the national team at which the various state teams came together with the, the sort of people that were overseeing the GIS of the National Zoning Atlas and the code analyst. So some tweaks were made, not a whole lot of like big changes to the methodology, but from the time that the first methodology was published in 2022, there was an update in 2024 that sort of accommodated all of the, I tell you what, there's nothing like zoning to have a million exceptions. Like you draw a square on a map and then you find out all the ways that doesn't fit. And that was true locally, it was true nationally. So we have worked hard. The national team has worked hard to get something that works for everyone, and it mostly does.
Yeah, and just to elaborate, this getting into the weeds, like we did a lot of the intense coding like a year ago. It's a year and a half process. So, but I think, for example, a lot of local codes, the PUD is written so that when actually there's like a rezoning and then the PUD rules refer to what it was zoned before, and then in practice it creates a new district that's a specific flavor of the PUD. So generally the philosophy is to code mapped districts. And so you can actually have unmapped districts, but they're probably not even visible to the public. So the kind of paradigm is what actually exists. And then that also means that if you have one of these like vague PUD zones, which takes on specific values when it's created based on what it was before, what we would have coded are the specific flavors, but not the general one. If that makes sense. So absolutely, all of these things are contemplated and worked through, and this is one reason it does take a little time to work on the details. So.
Sure. So on this 3-county one, the pilot, did you work with the West Michigan Shoreline Redevelopment Commission at all?
So this is an example of where, this was the team led, or the Michigan team led. We went and there were not big collaborations. There were not steering committees. There was we went to where your zoning code is publicly available and we downloaded it. We did the same with your map, and we acted as though we were using the information that is publicly available. But that's only one way to do it, right? The other way to do it would be to build that team, to build that steering committee, to work together so that everybody has an understanding of what goes into this information and also what you can get out of it.
And to that end, so what is the basic requirement for being a coder, and where is there a place where you can sort of see those 107 questions? Is that something that's publicly available?
Yeah, so I just answered that one with a link to the national methodology, which is a freely downloadable, which not only lists what's coded, but provides voluminous methodological guidance for exactly how to how to code it. So, you know, make a cup of tea and tuck in. In fact, those of you still on the line, you're the hardcore. If you want to do this, the first thing we're doing with Housing North is their internal staff are studying that methodology, and then we'll have our training. And so that's that answers that
Thank
about
you.
that issue. Yep.
And
Oh, the
then,
basic requirements. So we had grad students in our report. We list the name of all the brilliant grad students who did it, but to hire them, we had an application process. And Sarah, who has been coding renewable energy ordinances, actually had an activity. And even the U of M grad students, some did better than others, and we hired the ones who did it the best. So you do need to have it's a certain type of person who's comfortable reading a fairly technical document where nuances of presentation influence what the right answer is, and then put in the right number. But it's not rocket science. I think it's something that most professional planners, many others comfortable working with zoning, would actually be very good to do, but maybe not your undergraduate intern that's never read a zoning code and would just be a little lost. Yep.
for folks that you guys have compared, this is a national thing. Is there a compare and contrast if there are other states where the state does zoning or the county does zoning and it is a much more centralized or regional thing? Is Michigan, because we're so local control, did you notice that those differences when you were comparing Michigan or these three counties to other states that have done this?
I mean, there was a pretty big range. So not every state is participating. So there were a few small states that, you know, sort of got done pretty quickly. The state of New Hampshire is one of them that comes to mind. Connecticut obviously was first because Sarah Broden is there. So there were a few that sort of seemed like they were able to sort of attack it in a more all at once sort of way. Since then, the national team has expanded and grown and gotten some of their own funding, and they have taken on some states. So I believe the state of Arizona is completed, and I don't know that that was all done, you know, sort of organically by a state-led team. There are some states that don't have a lot of zoning, but so Montana is one. They really only had sort of the two municipal areas that needed to be coded as such. If you look at the atlas, there's also, we didn't talk about this because it didn't come up in our area, but it also identifies areas that have no zoning. So there are some states there, most of the state doesn't have any zoning at all. So in order to complete the state, you really just had to do, in Montana, for example, those two municipal areas. Boy, you find out what a wide variety of approaches there are across these 50 states.
And just to weigh in, Amy, and I also, have you asked the question, the perils of decentralizing police power? So that
was kind of what I asked.
Okay, yeah.
Say perils.
Fair enough. I don't think there's been a serious statewide look at land use issues since the Granholm administration, since that Blue Ribbon Task Force. I think the trends in land use in our state are concerning, and I think many on the line here might be aware of that. And I personally, give me a call if you want to replicate that famous sprawl map. You know, so I do think if we eventually, the immediate uses are kind of at the community scale, the regional scale, but if we do succeed in kind of covering more and more of the state, we will have a data set that could be useful for looking at those broader trends and possibly rethinking our zoning and planning enabling act or structure of how zoning is handled. You know, in light of what we learn. So.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, I know that's something that the map board was looking at, and they talked to different planning agencies that have more regional power, and really about how that all works. And it is interesting, the states that do have, Florida has, you know, required, they have a state planning agency, and just it is something that the map board is looking at. And I think the question would be, Leah or Dr. Goodspeed, since there are all these approaches, I think what I found in talking when I sat in on those map board meetings is just because it's centralized doesn't mean it's actually better. I'm not saying
Yes,
that,
yes,
I'm not saying that
absolutely,
our use of land
absolutely.
in Michigan
Yeah.
is not concerning.
Yeah.
But I did find that there's bad planning going on even at a statewide level.
And
in the
even
United-
states that have robust smart growth policies like Maryland, it has not been a magic one. They have priority growth areas. They have impact fees, and even states with growth boundaries, then you're negotiating that, having leapfrog problems and so forth. So no, I don't have a solution, but absolutely, it's a very complex topic, and we're excited that folks maybe are interested in delving in. Maybe there'll be an opportunity to do that.
Well, thank you. If anybody has questions, we have answered. Thank you, Dr. Goodspeed, for typing in those, and especially the more technical GISE, Esri type ones. Thank you for that. We have reached the end unless I see something else pop up. I want to thank everybody for their time. Leah, Rob, any last words?
And Amy, I think as we mentioned this, this is available for CM credit. You'll include that information.
Yes, so I did
Yeah.
answer. This is being recorded. We will trim off the beginnings and ends, the chaff, and get it finished and sent to folks with a link, along with a link to CM credits and any other resources that the team thinks would be valuable to all of you. So thank you all who registered, and you can look for a link or an email in the next week or so.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day.